from a scientific perspective, why is that?
Based off of a couple weeks ago, how scientific should I go?
I mean, as long as you use words that we can understand as normal humans, I think we'll be okay.
Primary motor cortex. So you have all those things happen. So that's why, like, I hate when you make it, because when people say it's like so simple, it's not that simple. Why it's useful.
You lost me at gray area, and I am now regretting asking for the scientific explanation. Welcome back to Past Your Prime, the podcast for active adults balancing life, training, and rehab. Today we're covering isometrics, what they are, why holding still can reduce pain and improve loading tolerance, and how to use them inside a real rehab or training plan. We'll also hit the biggest mistakes, including using them for the wrong injury, loading too aggressively, and forgetting the goal is still better movement. I'm Alex Kiker, pro volleyball player, dad, and a guy who has finally found an exercise tailored to my age group, standing completely still. We've been conditioned to think that training has to involve heavy moving weights and a lot of joint crunching noise, but lately I've realized some of my biggest breakthroughs come from movements where I don't move a single inch. I love those because they're hard, but they're getting easier. Anyway, joined by Craig Smith, physical therapist, strength coach, and the guy who holds me back when I try to lift like I'm 22. I'm not. Today we're breaking down the science of staying still, why it's the ultimate hack for grumpy joints, and how it can actually make you more explosive.
Great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Best intro ever.
I disagree. I think last week's was way better. As you can tell, we had to take a whole week off based on the poor performance of
the one before
that episode.
We had to take time off.
I
do like that.
We're back, and we wanted to talk about isometrics, something that I've been using quite a bit recently to help with some knee and Achilles issues that I've had. But I think there's more to isometrics just than trying to reduce pain or increase tendon load. I think there's some performance things we can talk about, and
absolutely
more isometrics than just lower body extremities as well.
Your initial conversation with me about it was you used it to reduce a flare-up that you had, and then second, that you were able to take your knee where you were still having a little bit of symptoms and basically take it the rest of the way to where it doesn't bother you at all anymore by using isometrics.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say like 2 weeks ago, I was trying to just do some heavy squats and realized, where did my knee pain go? And really the only thing that I added in was just some wall sits, which I've progressively overloaded to some weighted wall sits. But probably over the last 4 months, I've been just kind of doing those as a warm up to any leg days that I have. And it has just made my knee pain pretty much completely disappear, which is
pretty cool.
A nice little benefit.
That's cool.
And then I've also been throwing them in for my Achilles, which has been kind of up and down with flare-ups. But when I use them consistently, my pain goes away.
Well, I think we could actually use this as compare both of them, because what I would say with your knee stuff is you undervalue what you did initially. And then I love how you used them at the end, basically to finish off what was your remaining symptom, which sounded like a tendon part, a tendon piece that was causing it. But when we initially started with your knee, there's definitely a joint injury. And if you would have started, I still in that situation would like isometrics, but the way you finished it, you were addressing a tendon injury. So you had which naturally happens with a lot of injuries, where you start with one, and then during the course of treatment, a second or a third injury seems to either come out or develop as part of the rehab experience. And so I think that'd be kind of interesting to think about your knee and then compare it to you're stuck a little bit on your Achilles tendon, which I think could be a different problem than just a tendon injury, or there's something that's missing in your plan. Isometrics could be a piece of it, but maybe there's a way we adjust it.
Yeah. And at least for currently, it seems like whenever I am consistent with my Achilles isos, it seems to kind of subside from the pain side. But then every time I go out and do extended amount of jumping, it seems to creep back in. Anyway, so I think at the simplest form, what are isometrics or ISOs, as we will probably refer to them?
Isometric. Yeah, isometric is basically you're going to be engaging your muscle without any noticeable movement in the body.
Yeah.
So the most common one is, like you just said, a wall sit. You'll see a lot with knee extension ISOs. You'll have things people use them performance-wise. They'll do like a push-up ISO where you hold the bottom. You'll see this all across the exercise. Anywhere where you just basically hold the motion, you don't move at all. That's an isometric where all your muscles are firing basically to keep you in the exact same place.
Yeah. So holding a position for plank is an ISO.
Yep.
And I think people have done that for a really, really long time, which seems very uncomfortable to me. I like to do sets of 3 or 4 for 45 seconds, and that seems to be my little sweet spot, but
okay,
you can definitely hold them way longer than that.
You will see psychos who do it for up to 5 minutes or even longer. Yeah.
And I've tried to experiment with those. It's been a while, but yeah, I mean, it's just wildly uncomfortable. And I think anything, I don't know, beyond like a minute to a minute and a half, you're getting kind of diminishing returns at that point. So
trying to go that long, how intense it can be. But yeah, it is interesting to go longer. I don't know the value of it either. I'm not against it. Just I think at some point it's not as useful.
When I coached a boys basketball team, this is slightly off topic, but gets into some wall sits. I had a couple of spots left on the team. I was having a really hard time making the decision. And so last day of tryouts, it's like, all right, boys, we're going to wall sit for a position on the team, basically.
No, you didn't. That is amazing.
And I had the whole team do it. So like, I was just thinking that in my mind, but I was like, we're going to close these tryouts out with wall sits. And I had some of the boys like grind it out. I'm talking 5+ minutes wall sits, like leg shaking. And I was just like,
did you go in front of those 3? Did you put them by each other and then just stare at them the whole time?
Well, and it was kind of funny because some of the kids that I think knew, like, I'm clearly better than everybody here. Like they, admitted it and were like, all right, I've done my wall sit, I'm done. But like, I think the boys that knew that like they were kind of on the cusp, like really grinded it out. And I was super proud of those kids
and then you're like, I ended up cutting all 3 of them. So with the hardest, it's that's terrible.
You've got 2 left legs, so unfortunately you can't play basketball.
Did you get any phone calls after that? After you made them do that? No. Back in the good old days where parents didn't do that.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah, you could be abusive towards
10
children.
years ago. Yeah,
great.
I wasn't getting in trouble for that. Nowadays, I'd have been fired.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one thing that I've noticed is if I've pretty much any time in recent past where I have knee pain, if I just go and do even a single 45-second wall sit, like my pain goes down drastically in my knee. From a scientific perspective, why is that?
What's happening? Well, based off of a couple weeks ago, how scientific should I go?
I mean, as long as you use words that we can understand as normal humans, I think we'll be okay.
Well, so sometimes I hear this described and people use almost magical language around it. It's not a magical thing that's happening. There's
I used the word nociceptors earlier, which is you initially taught me, but then told me that my thinking might be wrong about
It's not that it's wrong. It's that it's dramatically oversimplifies what happens, because the change with isometrics, with a lot of things that we do for where you have we call pain relief or an analgesic response, it's a lot more complicated and it happens at multiple levels through your nervous system. So locally, you may be changing what will stimulate the nociceptor, and a nociceptor is basically just a peripheral nerve that then goes to your spinal cord. And sometimes people will misuse it and say it's a pain receptor. It's not actually a pain receptor, and the reason you want to differentiate is that is because pain doesn't happen until it hits your brain. So it's just a nerve transmitting stimulus according to its parameters, which can be mechanical, chemical. You have reasons why those will fire, and those often aren't going to change that much, or it may slowly reduce as you continue to re-stimulate them. I think that that's not the biggest reason that it starts to feel better when you do the isometric. I think it's more once it hits your spinal cord, there's these inner neurons at the spinal cord that shut down, and they're inhibitory. They modulate the pain that's going to be transmitted up to your brain. Then you also have this area in your brain, your RVM and your periaqueductal gray area, that will basically send down a signal, and they will inhibit the stimulus. Once again, that once it hits your spinal cord, it'll make it so that it blocks it off. And that's maybe even overstating a little bit. It modulates what gets sent up to your brain. And then once it gets to your brain, there's a cortical inhibition that happens at your primary motor cortex. So you have all of those things happen. So that's why, like, I hate when you make it, because when people say it's like so simple, it's not that simple why it's useful. So it happens at like multiple levels, from your nociceptors to your spinal cord to your brain.
You lost me at gray area, and I am now regretting asking for the scientific explanation
so
of this.
It's more, but what's cool about it is, what I think about it, if you get an analgesic response, I think it does rule in or give you a really strong idea that what you're doing is probably attacking the actual root issue locally that's causing your symptoms. But it's not that you just all of a sudden fix the tissue in the area. That's actually not what happened.
Yeah, so it's like a short-term pain response, but then long-term it can also help with rebuilding of collagen and your actual tendons, just based off the time under tension principle.
Well, it has the opportunity. So to go back to your two issues, the reason I don't think your knee is an issue and that the isometrics work so well is we address your underlying joint injury, which you had swelling in your knee joint. And oftentimes people who will use isometrics and who've been taught them to help improve a tendinopathy, which is probably the most common reason people will use isometrics, they don't address why that tendinopathy developed in the first place. They start to use this because it reduces pain in the moment, but it doesn't long-term make it feel better. And that's because you're not actually building tissue capacity. It's like you're taking a Advil and it's blocking some of the symptoms from hitting your brain for a period of time, but then it wears off, which it will wear off, and it doesn't create long-term success. That's why, like, when you look at the studies that look at isometrics and how they work, even the ones where they're holding it for 45 seconds and they're loading the heck out of the tendon, is because something else is either going on or they're not addressing the triggers versus the treatment. You're not creating a therapeutic gap for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah.
So what I would say is we address that with your knee. With your Achilles, I don't think you've addressed your triggers throughout the day. So for example, if the tendon, like your Achilles, which is basically a spring and it's getting loaded with every step that you take, you probably want to address the tendon when you're taking walking into account, and not ignore that you may not notice it as much with walking, or even at all, but it can actually be contributing to your symptoms. And those would be things I always think through when I'm picking an exercise like this. It's not a miracle cure, even if it makes your pain go away in the moment.
One of the things that I wanted to just kind of talk about is the difference between the rehab side of it and the performance side of it. Mm-hmm. So I think we've kind of been focused on the rehab side of it, but there's also potentially a performance enhancing metric here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And one of those is overcoming isometrics, which I haven't dabbled in too much, but I've definitely messed with before. Do you want to try and explain those, or do you want me to?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically it is pushing against a movable object is how I have typically used those. The way that I've done them in the past is putting the barbell on my back, but under the bar holders, so that I'm pushing against something that's never going to move and holding that for just kind of as long as I can. And those can be kind of good on the rehab side too, for somebody that maybe is having range of motion limitations or pain with certain ranges of motion. Mm-hmm. I've tried it with the leg extension, and that one just kind of pissed off my hips a little bit. So I try to just do those on a little bit more of the rehab side of things with lower weight, but I also had some success with heavier weights. It just pissed off my TFL. So
before we go to the next thing though, so it made your hip a little like painful?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to put a pin in that because we'll come back to that one.
Okay. But yeah, what are your thoughts on
what was the second one? So you said it was overcoming, and the second one, typically somebody is holding the motion and they're not letting it go down.
Right.
Would be the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and that would be like a machine loaded something or other, comparatively to just the body weight variations that we've kind of talked about thus far.
And I would say that there is a third variation and maybe a fourth variation I like. The third variation would be you do a functional movement and you hold the transition, that is so underused in my opinion. You often see it in tempo squats, for example, or tempo exercises. All the tempo exercises is there's 4 numbers. It's how fast you go down when you hold the bottom position, how fast you go up, and then before you start the next rep, how long you're holding it for. And so those two numbers at the top and at the bottom, those are often isometrics that you're holding for. That's a control one that I like, and we can come back to that. And then the other one that I like to use isometrics for is addressing any motor issues. So whether it's overactivation of a muscle, inhibition of a muscle, or what commonly happens when people misuse isometrics is they start to develop a dysfunctional co-contraction where they fire every muscle, which can also become its own issue. So I think of it how you just said. So holding a position and not letting to move at all. Trying to overcome, like you're pulling up against the bar, like you said, pulling as hard as you can, where it's at an effort that is almost unsafe to do any other way. So it just feels safe. And then working on controlling functional movements and then normalizing motor patterns. It's kind of the four I think through.
And the first one you had mentioned, like a pause squat, would be an example of that.
Of a functional. They'd be a functional isometric. And I find that those are really useful and very underused. So for example, if I'm trying to get somebody to get a max that they've never hit before, I'll typically work transitions. I think most people lose the ability to lift that amount at a transition point. And if you own the transition, it's the part where your muscles are going to be working the hardest. It can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and that's like a focus on the eccentric and isometric portion.
You've got it. And then be explosive on the way up.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of research that will increase strength and the ability to lift more weight.
Well, it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. Agreed. And it makes you really get comfortable with that feeling of slowly coming out of it. When you're truly maxing out, which you don't have to do, but if you're truly maxing out trying to increase your weight, it can be kind of scary when you're in those bottom positions and it's inching up second by second. But if you know that you have that in you, it's a lot less concerning. So there's a mental component to that I like a lot.
Don't do these alone at home. You'll end up crushed under a bar.
Yeah. Get stuck under the bar is not fun.
Preferably having a spotter or some racks under you can help avoid catastrophe. But I remember doing those at old SPC many years ago, and there's probably a reason why I haven't really gone back to them, although I probably need to.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're ridiculously uncomfortable. You have to really kind of have a high level of motivation. And I also, just think going back to having somebody behind you can also just help some of the fear of potentially not being able to come out of those, because I certainly got stuck a few times. And
if you're at that load, you should have a spotter. Right. You don't want to be doing anything stupid like that. But from a performance standpoint, those four things can be interspersed into any functional program, and you can have really good results.
Really,
absolutely any movement. It's actually very, very. It's really useful to think of it in that way. So the first one, where you're learning how to hold a position, you're doing it with a significant load. That's an interesting experience. You can do that with a ton of weight that you wouldn't be able to do in any other position. The other one is like your ability to exert a ton of force. That's one where you're talking about, like, if you're pulling a bar up, like almost like you're doing a deadlift, but you're hooking it underneath the squat rack so that the bar can't move at all. Yep. You're producing a level of tension you would not be able to do in any other way. The other two, I think, address dysfunctions that naturally develop. Those are so underused and such an integral part of performance that I think people need to do more of them. You need to be able to control transitions. If you have a messy transition, and what a messy transition looks like, you stop too soon. So you can't go all the way down because you don't transition well, and your brain knows you're not going to be able to transition well. It's not going to allow you to go down farther. If I see somebody struggling to get full depth, we can do sit to stands to the depth we want them to do, and then I'll do an isometric at the bottom where they literally sit down and then barely come off the bench, and have them hold that position. They'll learn how to control it and feel just more comfortable, and they can immediately drop and get way more depth. But then the other one you see, and I see this with people who do like the whole ass to grass, they can't control parallel. And so they'll actually go down and bounce out of the bottom because they have such a poor control at the bottom. And that's also an issue. And that's where those isometrics are really, really nice. Yeah. But then exercise itself can cause some muscles to fire too hard and some muscles to turn off. And the isometrics, if you can really make sure that you're engaging the muscle you want, can have a really great response. a really good response.
I've been working on kind of all of the squat variations you said there, because at somewhat moderate weights, I can get to the bottom and bounce out of it. But then when I'm going, 1 rep maxes, I try to look at myself in the mirror, make sure I get to below parallel, just below parallel, and then like explode out of that thing, because I feel like I'm very close to that point of no return where I'm going to get crushed by the bar. And
are you doing like a side view, or is it a dead on view?
I have both options available to me
Nice.
at my gym.
So you will in the bottom look to the side.
If I need to, yeah. I try to do the forward-facing one when I'm maxing out, but there have been times where that rack is not available, and so I'll have to do the side view.
Heck yeah.
And sometimes there's a person in the one next to me, and then the mirror's beyond them, so they're like, "Why are you looking at me while you're crushing yourself?"
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
Like,
It seems weird. You're
trying to make sure that I can get out. And then you had also mentioned holding the bar under you for like one of the overcoming isometrics. And I had some success with doing like a split squat variation of that with the bar in between my legs, just to get some extra
That is
loading.
so nasty.
Yeah, they're so hard.
That is one of the, if I have to say my least favorite exercise in the world, I recently just did, which is a split squat isometric hold, where the bar is between your legs and then you barely come off and you're in a lunge position. It's a horrible experience. My quads got such an insane pump.
Yeah,
I
was
didn't
doing
like
those
it.
just holding kettlebells as well, and either one of those variations is just very rough.
My brother's gonna talk crap now that I said quad pump. I don't know why I said that. Yeah,
a little bit of gym bro.
He's gonna
right there.
He's gonna say something. Yeah.
All of this comes to say that I feel like isometrics are a little bit of a cheat code. Are they generally safer than doing the full functional movements?
When you say safer, what are you thinking when you say safer?
Risk of injury.
Risk of injury. Well, once again, I know this is like stupid and splitting hairs, but it depends. It's if you're doing an isometric and you're doing the first two and the tendon's not ready for it, no, it's not safe at all. You're going to be doing it at loads that you haven't done in a. You can go way harder because you're producing force. You can max out everything. You're not trying to move at all, so you can produce a ton of force. And your tendon or whatever may not like it. If there's anything in the chain that's not comfortable, you could easily irritate it. Like for example, I've done an ISO before where I irritated the piss out of my neck, and it was for my legs. Right? That doesn't. So pulling the bar really hard and it set off my neck. It's not one of those things where not going to hurt you or not cause any issues. It totally could. So I think of it as there's definitely a place. So if you feel really good though, it's one of the best, safest ways to load super, super heavy at loads that you'll never do otherwise. So I do like it in that fashion, but I really like to think through, make sure that the body has a good response, and do it at a lower level before you totally max it out.
I'd say there's a difference too between just doing like a body weight ISO or a very low weight ISO versus an overcoming, pushing against an immovable object or pulling an movable object. I don't know why that's so hard to say.
Well, and I think isolating it. So if you're doing it in a position where it's a really isolated exercise, like a loaded knee extension ISO, where you're sitting down, the leg is kind of kicked out at 45 degrees, and then you're holding it for a count. So if you're holding it for up to 45 seconds to a minute, you clearly aren't doing a max out load. You wouldn't be able to hold that time under tension for that level of time. And in that situation, I think you're in a pretty safe place. But if it hurts at all, then at that point, you have to gauge what your response is. And we could go more in depth on that. There's some really easy ways to know if the isometric is appropriate, the way that you're loading it. But then at the end of the day, the biggest problem I see with isometrics, if it's in somebody who's totally healthy, is that you can absolutely develop really weird motor patterns around it, where people will start to fire muscles that should not be firing. And that's what I mean by a co-contraction. So I have people who come in who don't feel comfortable with the body weight squat, and they feel super comfortable with heavier weight. And that's because they've used their muscles in a dysfunctional pattern. And I've seen isometric activation actually seem to make that worse. So you have to be careful to not overactivate, and to also, so it can't be the only thing. It has to be as part of a functional movement. You don't want that to be your only portion of your programming.
At the simplest terms, to kind of check if it's working, like your pain should go down from your first set to your last set. I think if that's not happening and your pain is increasing, then you probably need to stop and reevaluate what your true issue is and make sure that you're attacking the right diagnosis.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is if you have pain, you want to make sure you understand what it is. If you have any swelling whatsoever, tendons do not produce joint diffusion. So if your joint feels swollen, knee is the easiest one to say, but if you feel that passively, if you passively move your elbow and you get pain at end ranges, that's typically not going to be a tendon issue. Same thing with the knee. If you can't completely extend your knee, that's probably not going to be your tendon that's driving it.
And ISOs aren't going to fix that.
They're not going to fix it, but they could make it so you can still load the muscle especially if you don't tolerate the joint moving. So it can still be a very useful part. But I think oftentimes isometrics are used synonymously with tendon injuries.
Right.
So let's just go first. Say it is a tendon injury. The thing I find the most useful is the Kennedy staging for tendinopathies. There's 4 stages. There's stage 1 is pain after the activity. So you don't really feel it during, but then after, your tendon becomes a little bit painful and then it goes away. Stage 2 is it hurts at the beginning and then it goes away during the activity and then it comes back after the activity. That's typically what people are talking about where it starts, it's basically at a 3 out of 10. And if it starts to build, you're doing too much to it. What should happen is it should go down or go away. Stage 3 is where it now hurts all of the time. So if you're somebody who's out there, you're starting to play the activity, you're starting to lift or whatever, and you feel it the whole time, it may go down a little bit, but basically it stays there and then it stays there after, but you're still able to do the activity, do it pretty close to the same level. You're at stage 3. If you're flirting with stage 3, you don't want to go to stage 4 because once you go to stage 4, now you're dealing with it hurts all the time and you also can't do the activity normally because it hurts so bad.
Tendinopathy.
Yeah. And that's one way to look at it because then that tells you how to address it. So if it's stage 1, you don't want to forget that it's there. So you want to do stuff before, and then you want to always make sure afterwards you're making sure that the tendon has a good response to the activity. That's kind of our idea around the rehab standard. The tendon should still feel good at the end of it. Whereas if you get to stage 2, you want to make sure that you're monitoring that the tendon symptoms drop because tendons do like load. But then once again, you still want to make sure that it has a good response afterwards. Once you get to stage 3, that you're starting to flirt with a tendon that's almost out of control and you're about to lose time. That's where I really like to go towards using artificial capacity or artificial stabilization tools like braces, things like a toe pad strap over the front of the knee. And you can do that for any tendon. So it's useful anywhere. You can even do that on the Achilles tendon, for example. And then all that does, it dampens it, changes how the tendon's getting loaded. And you can, based off the person's response, you can see if it handles it better and drops the symptoms. Once you get to 4, you have to drastically change what you're doing, because you're flirting with a tendon that you're not going to be able to get in front of. So that's one thing. And then when you think of tendons along a continuum. So you have reactive tendinopathies where you just hurt it and you overloaded it. You have tendon disrepair where the tendon itself, the structure has changed, now it's unhealthy. To a degenerative tendon. Once you get to a degenerative tendon, it's hard to get the tendon to come back. And now you're stuck with something that may not go away, or you have to build compensations around. And using those 2 structures, it's really easy to then intersperse isometrics. Like you just said, you used it, you're having a little bit of knee pain at the start of a volleyball match, that knocked it out, right? And then
stage 1 and
very good
to it as where I'm stuck in stage 1 and 2 with my Achilles. And
you're more like 2 and 3 for the other one, right? Because it hurts almost the whole time.
Not necessarily. Based on the way that you just explained it, I would say like I can get to stage 1, but then if I do too much activity, I end up in stage 2.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's useful if you remember those. It tells you when to use those isometrics, as long as the isometrics actually reduce the tendon symptoms.
So for the listeners out there that may be wanting to add this to their workouts, what does that kind of look like?
Are we thinking from a performance standpoint, or
I'm thinking from a rehab standpoint?
From a rehab standpoint. So the first thing would be the knee is just the easiest one because this is going to be the most one that people I think use the isometrics for. Make sure it's not a knee joint issue and not a meniscus issue. And because if you treat it like that, which I see this, you've heard of the knees over toes guy, right? I think I've told you this before. I actually really like when there's new things that become super popular, because you have people who come in with hilarious injuries related to that person's philosophy.
Right.
And I think it happens. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but from seeing those individuals, everything getting treated like it's a tendon injury, for example. And we were talking about this where somebody said, okay, I've been having this knee thing for a while, and I saw that he was doing isometrics, and I told him, well, you're just not doing it heavy enough. And if you take that logic and assume that everything's a tendon injury, but it's actually something else, those individuals come in and they blow their knee up. They make it dramatically worse than what it would have been before they came in. I find that hilarious. It's like they're trying to do, it's not really hilarious. It's actually kind of upsetting.
Sad,
yeah. But it's funny because you always see these things happen over the course, like every year and a half, you have a new fad that comes out and it brings with it these different variations of injuries that didn't happen before. So now I get people who may have had a tendon injury, but most likely did not have a tendon injury. And then they come in and they blow their knee up from something that probably would have recovered on its own to now it's dramatically worse because it wasn't a tendon injury. So you want to make sure it's a tendon injury if you're doing the isometrics for that. But then, like I said, if it's a joint injury, I often will use isometrics as well because it doesn't enjoy being moved in range. So I'll do it in the pain-free range and then I'll isometrically load the muscles. Yeah. So if somebody's painful, find whichever portion of the isometric feels nice and where it's firing the muscle, and then anywhere between 2 to 3 sets, and then gets the muscle to fire really well to surround the joint that's hurting you, and it'll feel really good.
Yeah. You want that pain to go down. I've been doing 4x45 back to back of a wall sit and a isometric calf raise hold. Okay. And those I've just integrated in my warm up and seem to work really well for me.
So you have the appropriate treatment, but you're not building tissue capacity, which then you can either think that there's something else that's going on, or more likely you have a hidden trigger. And so all a hidden trigger is, for anybody who hasn't heard that term from us before, it means you have something that's lowering your tissue capacity and you do not realize it's lowering your tissue capacity. So for you, the biggest one to me would be walking, if it's like Achilles tendon, because you look for things where you load it a lot more than what you realize, and we don't realize how much load goes through the Achilles tendon with every step you take. Yeah. So put a heel lift in your shoe, and that should knock it out the rest of the way.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
If your current workout routine leaves you too beat up to actually enjoy your weekend, stop moving and start holding. It turns out looking like a statue in the gym might just be the secret to staying on the court. Feel free to check us out at pastureprime.com. Give us a subscription and a rating. Drop a comment below if you like this content. I think likes and comments help us reach a broader audience, which helps us. And I think we'll probably see you on the next one.
PYP, baby.
Peace. The outro is going to be talking about
hair care.
Yeah. I had to go find my mustache wax, and I still have it, and it's still good.
Did you use that today?
No, but I will this week.
Mustache wax. Yeah. That's just basically to put it and hold it in place.
Yeah, so I can curl it out.
Do you oil it? Do you oil your beard? Your mustache?
No, I did have some beard oil, but I felt like I looked too greasy. I don't like the greasy look.
I don't like the greasy look either.
Yeah. Anyway,
boom, a clot.
3, 2, 1. Mortal Kombat. Dun, 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 dun. Second time.